Title: The entire plane could hear the millionaire's baby crying until a Filipino boy from economy class. The first cry cut through the recycled air like a siren, sharp enough to turn heads, relentless enough to bend patience. No first-class champagne flute could soften it, no platinum card could command it to stop. The man in the tailored suit, an island of control in a sea of strangers, was drowning. Before we begin, if this kind of story speaks to your heart, feel free to share where you're reading from. It's always beautiful to see how far stories like this can travel. Enjoy the story. Chapter 1. A sky of thin air. It was Flight 2187 from New York to Los Angeles, the kind of flight where conversations stayed polite and problems were meant to stay behind the curtain. Nathaniel Brooks adjusted his cufflinks for the third time. He was 42, a name in business magazines, a man who knew the language of market share and margins better than he knew the language of lullabies. He'd been handed the role of fatherhood like a tux handed before a gala, elegant, heavy, slightly ill-fitting. Ella was 6 months old, light as a whisper when she slept, thunder when she didn't, and she was crying now. The cry was not a fuss, it was a flare. It was something is wrong in the only vocabulary she had. He had tried the bottle. She turned her head, choking on her own breath between sobs. He had checked the diaper, clean. He had walked the aisle like a metronome, shushing, pleading, bargaining with the universe in murmurs unfit for boardrooms. "Would you like a warm towel for her ears?" the flight attendant asked, the kindness in her eyes just a thin veil over concern. Others had begun to glance over, first curiosity, then pinched smiles, then sighs. "She's never like this," Nathaniel whispered, the confession hot with shame. 3 rows back, a man in a slate suit cleared his throat and said the thing he thought money bought him the right to say. "Some of us paid for quiet." Nathaniel's cheeks burned. If he could have handed the crying to one of his assistants like a meeting that ran over time, he would have. But he couldn't. There, with a baby screaming beneath dim cabin lights, he felt oddly human, frayed, on display. He blinked hard and said to no one and everyone, "I'll pay anyone on this plane who can help." The attendant's smile faltered, the cabin stilled, and then the curtain shifted. Chapter 2. Crossing the stitch between worlds, he had to squeeze past the half-closed curtain, the edge of it brushing his shoulder like a gate that didn't want him to pass. He paused, then stepped through anyway. He was small in first class, swallowed by the butter leather and hushed light, his hoodie threadbare at the cuffs, a backpack patched with a stitched Philippine flag and a tiny robot keychain bobbing at the zipper. "Sir, I need you to return to," the attendant began, gentle but firm. "It's okay," Nathaniel said, standing there with his daughter like an apology, or a plea. He didn't know. Do you know anything about babies?" The boy nodded once. "A little," he said, voice steady. "My Lola, my grandmother, she taught Highlight, traditional massage. Sometimes babies cry from ear pressure, gas, too much newness." He offered a small smile. "I can try." The man in the slate suit made a noise, a scoff caught between classes, then stopped when the boy approached the infant with the reverence of someone touching a saint's relic. "May I?" the boy asked. Nathaniel surrendered Ella, every cell in his body tense, ready to take her back at the first flinch. The boy, 17 maybe, cradled her with a confidence that was gentle, not performative. He shifted her so her belly lay along his forearm, head nestled in the crook of his elbow. "Hi, baby," he murmured. "Hi, little one. Ang lakas ng boses mo ha, your voice is strong." He laughed, soft. "Okay, Lang Yan, it's okay." He began to hum. The tune was unfamiliar to most ears on that plane, but its bones were old and patient. "Sa yugoy ng duyan," he whispered between notes. In the rocking of the cradle, the lullaby mothers and fathers in far islands and crowded cities had sung for 100 years. His other hand moved in small, precise circles along Ella's back, not random, not guessing. He traced beside the spine, pressed gently into tiny, tensed muscles, then shifted to her abdomen, overhead palms carefully pressing at a diagonal. "Highlight," he said when he saw Nathaniel watching. "My Lola had hands like warm bread. She taught me where to touch, what to listen for. Babies are like tiny oceans. You calm the surface, the tide follows." He pressed 2 fingers just under Ella's ribcage. There was a sound then small, impolite, gloriously human, and Ella jerked once, startled by her own body. The pitch of her cry softened. Then, as the boy's hum lowered, her breath began to mirror the rhythm. "That's it." The boy's voice was barely above the engine's drone. That's it, Mahal, Mahal, dear, beloved. The cabin changed. First class, which had been tight with tension, seemed to loosen its shoulders. The slate suit man looked away. The attendant stopped mid-step and smiled, relief cooling her eyes. Nathaniel exhaled. He hadn't realized he hadn't been breathing. "What's your name?" he asked. The boy adjusted his grip, careful not to break the spell. "Miguel," he said. "Miguel de la Cruz, Miggs." "I'm Nathaniel," he said out of habit, then felt the absurdity of last names and titles as he watched this boy soothe his universe. "Thank you, Miggs." "Walling Anuman," Miggs said. "Not a big thing. You're welcome." Chapter 3, 2 seats, 1 conversation. "Sit," Nathaniel said when he found his voice again. He gestured to the empty first-class seat beside his. "Please?" Miggs blinked at the seat like it might be a prank. "I shouldn't, I mean, it's quieter here," Nathaniel said, smiling for the first time in 2 hours. "Stay until landing, it's the least I can offer." Miggs took the seat like someone stepping into a church pew, careful not to scuff the space with his presence. He kept rocking, kept humming. Ella's cries turned to hiccups, then frustrated whimpers, then a sigh as if the world had finally loosened its grip on her lungs. "How did you know to do that?" Nathaniel asked, words low to not wake the sleeping quiet. "My Lola Nita was a high lot in late," Miggs said. "Midwife too. She always said babies speak with their bodies first. We just have to listen in the right way." He nodded toward Ella. "Sometimes it's ears, sometimes it's tummies, sometimes it's the people holding them. We pass our storm to them without meaning to." Nathaniel winced. "I'm a storm," Miggs' smile softened. "You love her," he said simply. "That's clear, but love runs hot when we think we're failing. Babies are good mirrors." A truth as soft and sharp as a whisper. "Where are you headed?" Nathaniel asked. "Los Angeles." "Anaheim," Miggs said, his face brightening. "We're finalists at the West Coast Robotics Invitational. My team built a robot that can navigate disaster debris using vibration feedback instead of cameras. Cheaper. We thought maybe, it could help in places without much anything." Nathaniel leaned forward. "That's incredible." He noticed then the calloused fingertips of someone who soldered wires and debugged code, the edge of a well-loved magnetic chessboard peeking from Miggs' backpack. A button on the strap, Makabaka Huwag Matakot. "Fight, don't be afraid. You play chess?" he asked, surprising himself. "My tate taught me when I was little," Miggs said, eyes drifting to the board like an old friend. "Ship work kept him away sometimes. We played on Messenger, same board, same banter." He shrugged, a flash of something old flickering across his face. "It makes you think ahead. It makes you forgive yourself when you lose. There's always another game." "I used to sail," Nathaniel said, the confession falling out of his mouth like a coin finally dropped. "No crew, no engine, just wind and choices." "Do you miss it?" Miggs asked. "Yes," Nathaniel said. He hadn't meant to say it so easily. But there it was, truth laid out between them like a shared tray table. "I do." The flight attendant returned with 2 waters and a tray balanced with a meal as sculpted as a museum display. She placed it in front of Miggs with the same deference given to executives, not street kids in patched hoodies. Miggs' eyes widened. "This, I can't." "You can," Nathaniel said. "Will you?" Miggs looked at Ella, then at Nathaniel, then at the tiny mountain of potatoes shaped like ovals, the salmon gleaming under lemon. "Salamat," he whispered. "Thank you." He ate slowly, as if the food might evaporate if he moved too fast. Ella slept against his chest as if she'd been born there. "Do you live in L.A.?" Miggs asked in between careful bites. "Mostly," Nathaniel said. "My wife, Margaret, is already there. Fundraising gala." He tried for lightness, found only fatigue. "If there were a way to outsource this flight, I would have. I had a nanny scheduled. She called in sick." "Moms and titas save the world," Miggs said with mock solemnity. "Until they don't, and then, boys like us figure it out." Nathaniel laughed. He couldn't remember the last time he had laughed at 35,000 feet. "Your parents?" he asked. "My mom, Alma, is a nurse in Queens, nights mostly. My dad," Miggs' mouth thinned into a line that had learned to hold pain without spilling. "He's back in Manila. It's complicated." "I'm sorry." "It's okay," Miggs said, like someone who had decided long ago that okayness was a choice. "Lola holds everything together. We all do in our own ways." Ella stirred. Miggs tightened his hold, shifted her weight with an instinct that made Nathaniel's eyes ache with something like gratitude or envy. "You can try now," Miggs said. "Same hold, gentle pressure here. She knows your smell, your heartbeat. The trick isn't to be me." It's to be you, but softer. Nathaniel took his daughter. He held her as Miggs had instructed. He pressed where Miggs had pressed. She nestled into the space above his heart, as if that space had been carved for her the day she was born. There are moments when a life pivots so quietly you don't hear the gears shift. This was one of them. Chapter 4, Names, Numbers, and What We Owe. They spoke the way strangers sometimes do when the plain cabin becomes a confessional, with the honesty reserved for people you might never see again. You're very good at this, Nathaniel said, not just at soothing babies, but at knowing when to talk, when to stay quiet, when to let the silence hold without collapsing. Miggs shrugged, embarrassed and pleased in equal measure. When my Lola gets tired, I watch my baby cousin. He had colic for months. We learned each other. The slate suit man drifted past, on his way to the restroom, his expression neutral now, if not apologetic, at least chastened. He avoided their eyes, which was apology enough in some languages. Miggs, Nathaniel said, feeling awkward and sincere at once, I want to do something for you, for your team. For your family, it's not charity, more like gratitude that moves. Miggs bristled barely, but Nathaniel saw it, pride clean and fierce. We're fine, Miggs said, reflex quick. We raised funds for the trip, food sales, GoFundMe. My Kuya's barber put a jar by the cash register that said help Miggs build robots. People stuffed crumpled ones and coins until the lid wouldn't close. He softened, aware of how he sounded. I mean, if you want to come see our match, cheer, that would be cool. Nathaniel smiled, relieved. I can do that. Bring the baby, Miggs added, emboldened. Robots look boring, but they're like pets. They need attention. She'll like the lights. Nathaniel opened his wallet, then closed it, embarrassed at the impulse. He reached for the familiar, his card, embossed with his name that got him through doors and gates. He wrote his personal number on the back. Here, he said, offering it like an olive branch. Text me the details, and if you ever want to shadow our engineers for a day. Miggs barked a laugh. Bro, I would trade my left sneaker for that. Keep the sneaker, Nathaniel said. Bring your whole team. Before Miggs could respond, before he could swallow the joy and unease at the same time, his phone vibrated. He glanced down and stiffened. What is it? Nathaniel asked. Miggs' mouth trembled. He looked at Ella first, as if the baby might answer for him, then at Nathaniel. My mom, he said, voice thin. She says Lola fell in the kitchen this morning. They think it's a mild stroke. She's at Elmhurst, he swallowed. She's asking if I can call. Airplanes are poor places for helplessness. Seat belts, tray tables, tiny windows, everything is designed to contain, but heartbreak is a wild thing. Use my phone, Nathaniel said without thinking. Less lag on Wi-Fi calling. Here. He remembered passwords he never shared with anyone and handed over the world. Miggs called on WhatsApp. Ma, he said when she answered. His voice softened into Tagalog, a river returning to its source. Kamusta, si Lola. The flight became the background noise to a little boy trying to be brave for his mother. Nathaniel watched the language wrap them both, gentle and fast strokes. Tests were okay, don't worry, do well, call your Lola if she wakes. Ma, Miggs said, his face glistening, I'm in first class. He laughed at the absurdity of it. I helped a baby. He glanced at Nathaniel, a rich baby. Through the tiny speaker, Alma laughed too, the sound like a medicine. Of course you did, she said in English, making room for Nathaniel to hear. You always help, Anak. Who raised you? Go do your robot thing. Make Lola proud. After he hung up, Miggs stared at the sleeping baby in his arms. The baby had migrated back to him during the call as if knowing his hands needed something to hold. I should be there, he said. At the hospital. You're going to be where you are, Nathaniel said. It wasn't advice. It was a permission he was granting himself at the same time. And then you'll go where you need to go. Miggs looked at the card in his hand. Okay, he whispered. Okay. Chapter 5, Descent and a Decision. When the plane began its slow dip toward Los Angeles, the seat belt sign chimed. Miggs reluctantly transferred Ella back to Nathaniel with the care of a priest handing over a relic. The baby opened her eyes, blinked twice, then settled. It felt like a benediction. Text me, Nathaniel said. About the hospital, about the competition, about anything. Miggs tucked the card into the stitched flag on his backpack like an amulet. Salamat, he said. Then with a grin that was half dare, half hug, see you at the robots. They didn't shake hands. It would have been too formal for something so strange and real. They nodded, a shared acknowledgement that something had been exchanged that didn't fit into words or wallets. The curtain closed behind Miggs as he returned to economy. It didn't feel like a door this time. It felt like a seam. Chapter 6, Los Angeles, Land of Masks and Mirrors. Los Angeles was bright enough to feel performative, hot enough to make truth sticky. Nathaniel's driver met him at the curb, installed a car seat with the efficient reverence usually reserved for donors. The city flowed by, billboards of flawless skin, palm trees like commas in an unfinished sentence, the Hollywood sign insisting that some fictions are geography. That night there was a gala. There was always a gala. The Beverly Wilshire ballroom glittered. Men wore tuxedos that fit like tailored apologies. Women wore gowns that moved like secrets. Margaret slid into view, all cheekbones and satin, a garnet at her throat pulsing with each laugh. "You made it," she said, kissing his cheek lightly. "How was the flight?" "Long," he said. "Strange, beautiful in a way." "That's new," she said, amused. "You hate flying." "I met someone," he said. "A kid, Filipino. He calmed Ella when no one could. He's in a robotics competition. He gave me a lesson in being present that I didn't know I needed." Margaret blinked, surprise curling her lips into something softer than a social smile. "Bring him by," she said. "I want to meet the boy who stole my husband's attention." Nathaniel smiled and checked his phone the way he had been doing every 10 minutes since landing, like a teenager in between classes. There was a text, a picture of a hand gripping a hospital bedrail, a wrinkled wrist with a plastic band, another hand over it. Caption: "She's awake, small stroke. She asked what first class looks like. I said it looks like her kitchen when she's laughing." Nathaniel laughed out loud, alone in a corner of a ballroom where laughter meant power. He typed, "Tomorrow. Anaheim, I'll be there." He looked up. The slate suit man from the plane stood not 5 feet away, the gleam of recognition in his eyes, the edge of discomfort like lint on his lapel. "Mr. Brooks," he said, "you run into that young man again." "Not yet," Nathaniel said evenly. "HM." The man shifted, his smile a shape not synonymous with warmth. "Unusual to let economy into first class, slippery slope." Nathaniel took a sip of champagne that suddenly tasted cheap. "Some slopes are worth slipping," he said. Then, without waiting for a reaction, he went to find his wife. Chapter 7, The Arena of Small Miracles. Anaheim smelled like popcorn and solder and ambition. The convention center was a coral reef of high school colors and banners. Teams ran drills, robots whirred, metal clattered against metal with the joyful arrogance of teenagers who believed they could change the world and had the schematics to prove it. Nathaniel spotted Miggs by the Woodside Pioneers banner, a ragtag cluster of kids in mismatched tees and one carefully lettered cardboard sign, "We fix things." Miggs' hoodie had been replaced by a team shirt one size too big, his hair tamed by gel that would sweat out by mid-morning. His eyes lit up when he saw Nathaniel. "You came," he shouted over noise and surprise. He bounded forward, then stopped, remembering himself. "Hi." "Hi," Nathaniel said, laughing. "This is Ella." He jiggled the baby on his hip. "This is a lot of robot." "You came on a good day," Miggs said, all nerves and pride. "We're down a wheel. Our code was buggy at 3 a.m., and the big schools think we're lunch. Perfect conditions." Ella reached toward Miggs, fingers opening and closing like a tiny crane. He took her, automatically, so naturally that Nathaniel didn't feel the usual eclipse of anxiety. She gurgled at the robot as if seeing a distant cousin. "This is Panicky," Miggs said, petting the robot affectionately. "Bat in Tagalog, sees in echoes." A coach from a rival team drifted by, eyes lingering on Nathaniel's suit, then on the baby in a sea of teenagers like a plot twist no one had scripted. "Fancy," she said, not unkindly. "Friend," Miggs said, defensive and soft at once. "Ate Sam, this is Mr. Brooks." "Oh," she said, recognition dawning. She smiled at Nathaniel. "If you're here to poach talent, get in line." She winked at Miggs and moved on. Nathaniel felt a rush of something unfamiliar and pleasant, insignificance in the best way. He was not Mr. Brooks, future of tech and dinner party bullet point. He was a dad holding a baby in a high school gym. They lined up. The buzzer blared. The match began. It was chaos that demanded choreography. Robots surged forward, arms whirring, wheels skidding. Panicky hummed low, scanning with makeshift sensors, tapping into the floor vibrations. The wealthier team's machines had cameras, LiDAR, polished frames. Panicky had duct tape and an attitude. Left, 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 Miggs shouted, fingers flying over a controller patched with colored tape. Drop, drop, no Tala, not that, he laughed. Just kidding, Tala, exactly that. Tala, Nathaniel asked, eyes wide. My little sister, Miggs said, breathless. He pointed to a video call propped against a water bottle, a small girl wearing a headband with glitter cat ears, watching from a hospital waiting room, bolting up and down in frame like a pogo stick with lungs. She's the team psych. Nathaniel wanted to memorize everything. The way Miggs' mouth moved when he concentrated, the way the team leaned into one another without asking, the way the cheap bleachers held a cathedral's worth of faith. Panicky found the target. Gently, almost tenderly, it scooped the scattered debris, foam blocks and aluminum cans into a designated zone. The cheap sensors pinged with antique joy. Come on, Miggs whispered. Come on, baby. The scoreboard ticked. Blue Alliance advanced. Woodside Pioneers surged to a spot in the next round. The gym roared. Miggs exhaled so hard he laughed at his own lungs. Nathaniel found himself clapping like a man at a children's recital who suddenly realizes the children are better than the opera. Ella just clapped, he lied to Margaret via text, even though their daughter had simply slapped her own knee. Margaret replied with a video of herself clapping in an office with too much light. I'm clapping too. Chapter 8. The twist you don't see coming. They made it to the finals on a streak of impossible moves and lucky breaks that were really just practice, wearing the mask of luck. Nathaniel watched the richest schools on the West Coast get edged out by a robot with one leg shorter than the other and a team that could make a castle out of scrap, and then invite you in for merienda. Midway through the last match, just when Panicky needed to do the thing it was born to do, the 18th century's idea of justice arrived in the 21st, a referee with a clipboard and a frown. Pit check, she said, tapping the robot's frame. Is this duct tape? The team froze. Miggs stepped forward. Yes, ma'am, it's to secure the battery housing. We filed the edges, tied down the wires. Regulations state. Nathaniel didn't think, he acted. What does it state exactly? He asked in the voice that opened gates and pried open lines in contracts. His tone softened when he saw the official flinch. I'm not arguing, I just want to understand. The official blinked. It says it must be secured with approved fasteners. Tape is not considered a fastener. We have zip ties, Miggs said quickly. 2. We used the rest on the drivetrain. I can fix it in 5 minutes. You have 2, the official said, watching the clock. Then the match resumes. The team scrambled, hands flying, bodies moving like one creature with many beating hearts. Miggs' hands shook, not from fear, Nathaniel realized, but from adrenalized joy. Nathaniel crouched, held the flashlight on his phone with the precision of years of perfectionism put to novel use. Give me your phone, Miggs said suddenly, eyes on the robot. Nathaniel handed it over. Miggs propped it against Panicky's side. A picture of Lola Nita filled the screen, white hair, eyes like gentle math, a smile that looked 5 minutes away from a laugh. Long story, Miggs said. She likes to watch when we fix things, makes us go slower. They finished in 1 minute and 52 seconds. The official nodded, impressed despite herself. The buzzer sounded. The final 2 minutes of the match whooshed by like a storm you escape by running straight into it. They lost to a school with chrome. By 2 points that felt like a mile. For a heart-stopping second, the fire in Miggs' eyes flickered. He looked at his team, their shoulders drooping, their mouths trying to remember smiles. Then his face changed. He pumped both fists in the air and shouted, "We did it!" He meant it. They had done it. They had built something that moved through the world with intention and kindness. They had stitched duct tape to a dream and made it hold. Nathaniel felt tears sting from a place not accessed by corporate videos and charity galas. Chapter 9, Love Languages. That was beautiful, Nathaniel told Miggs as the noise ebbed. I haven't felt something like that in years. In a gym that smells like hot dogs and motor oil. Miggs grinned. Welcome to church. Ella squealed, high and delighted. Miggs lifted her high above his head, and she laughed the kind of laugh that turns men into fathers and buildings into homes. Do you want to come to dinner? Nathaniel asked impulsively. My wife would love to meet you. And he paused, then decided he was done with performative distance. I want to hear more about Lola. Miggs' phone pinged. A message from his mother, stable. Eating. Nag alaga ng nurse. The nurse is taking care of her. She's good, he exhaled. We can go. They ate in Nathaniel's kitchen, not in a restaurant that made people whisper. Margaret sat cross-legged on a bar stool, dressing down her elegance, asking real questions about classrooms with broken AC units, and how you solder when the lights flicker in your apartment, because the building is older than your landlord admits. Here, Miggs said after dinner, standing in the living room with the city spread out behind them like glitter thrown into air. He took Ella and swayed, humming. He guided Margaret's hands, then Nathaniel's. Press here, gentle, circles not poking, think warm. Warm, Margaret repeated. Warm, Nathaniel said. He wanted to say, teach me everything. You asked me on the plane how I knew, sir, Miggs said later, when Ella had fallen asleep with her cheek on Nathaniel's shoulder in the molten way only babies and drunk poets can manage. The thing about Highlot is it's not really a technique, it's a way of paying attention. You listen with your hands, you notice with your heart. That's all, he shrugged. You can learn it, anyone can if they want to. Nathaniel watched as Margaret watched him as he watched their daughter. Sometimes the eye is a mirror, sometimes it's a window. This was both. Come work with us, Nathaniel said then, the words emerging without the armor of formality. Not as charity, not as a mascot we trot out at staff meetings. As Miggs, as the person you already are. We'll pay, we'll make it real. Summer internship, robotics lab access, and, he hesitated, then pushed on. And I want to build something with you for kids like you. A lab that doesn't care what their last name is or what zip code they sleep in. Miggs' mouth opened, closed. He glanced at Margaret, who smiled, small, fierce. Ella snored softly, a cartoon sound in a real room. I have school, Miggs said, as if reminding himself he's allowed a life. I have Lola, I have my team, but I want to. Then we make it work, Nathaniel said. We do what we ask the world to do for us, we adapt. Chapter 10, Messages that Open Doors. Accommodations were arranged, not because Nathaniel flipped a switch, but because he asked for help in ways that didn't assume it would be given. A car for Alma on her night shifts, paid for without announcement. A letter to Miggs' principal, not a flex, but a conversation. Here's what he's been offered. Here's how we keep him in class. Here's how we help his friends too. He sent an email to his general counsel that began, I once thought generosity was a budget line. Now I think it's a design principle. Can we talk? He signed another at midnight. Let's build the lab. An hour later, an architect texted back a sketch, a glass room with tables on wheels and a wall of pegboards shaped like constellations. A name across the top, the De La Cruz Center for Open Engineering. Not my name, Nathaniel said aloud, alone in his office while Los Angeles slept and Manila woke. Ours. His phone pinged again. A video from Miggs. It was Lola Nita in a hospital bed, hair in a neat bun, voice thin but fierce, speaking directly to the camera. Mr. Nathaniel, she said, rolling his name around like candy. Thank you for making my Apo, my grandson, feel seen. But remember, when you hold a baby, you hold a future. Hold gently. That is all. Salamat. Nathaniel swiped tears he would not have believed himself capable of at the beginning of the week. He typed, I'm learning. Thank you for the lesson. Salamat Po. Chapter 11, Cracks that let light in. Stories about rich men changed by poor boys are easy to tell badly. They tend to become parables where one person glows and the other forgives. This is not that. Nathaniel backslid. He snapped at an assistant for printing something double-sided when he needed eyes on a graph. He overruled a manager because he could. He missed a doctor's appointment for Ella because a European investor would only take the call at a terrible hour. He caught himself. He apologized. He changed the system. He installed a lactation room on the floor where there had been none. He set a policy, no meetings after 5 p.m. without explicit consent from everyone invited. If the highest paid person in the room hadn't spoken last, the meeting didn't count. He called Miggs after each small change and said, Does this feel like something or like a press release? Miggs said, Feels like something, or feels like both, or feels like a press release. He did not confuse gratitude with diplomacy. At home, Nathaniel walked the halls at 3 a.m. with Ella pressed to his shoulder until his back ached and his arms trembled. He found that wishing the crying away made it worse, and welcoming it made it settle. He and Margaret learned to be a team by learning to be a trio. They invited Miggs and Alma and Tala over for dinner on a Friday. There were pancit and grilled fish, and a cake from a bakery that knew their family by the sound of their feet. They taught Margaret how to eat with a spoon and fork together, not knife, and laughed when she overcorrected. They taught Nathaniel the Tagalog for more rice, please, and everyone cheered when he got the vowels right. That night after they left, Margaret said into the dark, "I like who we are when they are here." "Me too," Nathaniel said. He meant not just the laughter, but the way the room felt full without feeling heavy. Chapter 12, The Ask on a Monday. Mig's team presented their robot to a room full of engineers who had designed the phones that other kids couldn't afford. Miggs didn't stutter. He didn't posture. He said, "This cost us $112. It could save someone you love." The room went very still. A month later, the storm came. Not in the sky. There, the weather was boringly perfect, but in an email that began, "Urgent, please review." A journalist had found a photo, Nathaniel in a tuxedo in a ballroom, in a philanthropy that looked like a mirror held up to itself. The headline asked in the bored way of outrage bait, "Is Brooks' new program real help or PR?" Nathaniel forwarded it to Miggs with the subject line, "You, me, lunch." Miggs showed up with a chessboard. "Show me your end game," he said, setting up pieces with a magician's hands. "When someone makes a move you didn't expect, what do? Try to get the board back to where I'm comfortable," Nathaniel said. "Nope," Miggs said, popping the pea. "You play the board in front of you." So they did. Nathaniel posted a statement that was not a statement, it was an invitation. "Come see for yourself," it said. "Don't interview me, interview them." He put an address, a date, a time. He stood in a warehouse that had been a storage facility 2 months ago and watched girls in hoodies teach each other how to wire a motor. The journalist came. She looked bored, then curious, then furious at her own cynicism. An 8-year-old kid with braids and an encyclopedic knowledge of gear ratios gave her a tour. She wrote a story that began, "Sometimes we pretend things are complicated so we don't have to do them." Chapter 13, a call from Queens in the early gray of a Sunday. Miggs called. The nurse had called Alma. Alma had called Miggs because even when boys become men, the first person you want to tell is the one who taught you to tie your shoes. "It was gentle," Miggs said, his voice small enough to fit in Nathaniel's palm. "Lola, in her sleep, the way she would want." Nathaniel said the only thing there was to say that wasn't a lie. "I'm here." Funerals in Queens are like wakes in Manila, neighbors as kin, food as ritual, wails as honest as rain. The room was full. The photographs on the board were the kind that make a life's arc look obvious when it never is. A young woman on a beach in late, a wedding photo stiff with joy, a baby in a basin, a hand on a forehead, a hand on a cheek, a hand on a tiny foot. Miggs stood up to speak and forgot the elegant sentences he had written at 2 a.m. about resilience and heritage. He cried. He laughed through crying. He said, "She taught me how to hold babies and to hold my breath underwater and to hold my tongue when we were too poor to afford opinions." He swallowed. "She taught me that nothing changes if you don't touch it with your hands." Nathaniel stood in the back, a tall white man in a room of brown faces, holding a baby on his chest like a passport. He listened. He did not perform. He handed Alma a tissue before she asked. He held Paniky's 3D printed wheel in his pocket like a rosary. Later, outside in the thin winter sun, Alma hugged him the way mothers hug the men who have treated their boys gently. "You are learning," she said, not condescending, not congratulatory, just true. "I am," he said. Chapter 14, The last move months blurred in the way that life does when you stop narrating it only to strangers. The lab filled. The robot won a county fair ribbon that felt bigger than a state championship. Ella teethed. Nathaniel learned to carry tiny tubes of ointment in his expensive briefcase. School ended. Summer began. Miggs took the internship, showing up early, leaving late, refusing to accept a coffee from the machine without making a second one for whomever was closest. On his last day, he found a package on his desk. Inside was a small notebook bound in worn blue cloth. A note tucked inside, "My father gave this to me before my first presentation. It helped me remember that what we plan is not always what happens. May it help you plan less and notice more." N. Miggs smiled. Wrote in the first page, "Find joy in the way duct tape shines under fluorescent lights." He went home and sat on the floor with his friends and drew plans on pizza boxes for a robot that could belay a rope across a river in Cavite during monsoon. He sent a picture to Nathaniel, who replied with an emoji that looked like a flexed arm and the words, "Teach me tomorrow." The next morning, Nathaniel, Margaret, and Ella met them at the lab. Miggs stood with a marker in his hand and said, Hands out. They all held their hands out. He pressed on the soft place between thumb and forefinger. He pulled gently at the tendon in the wrist. He showed them the way you can move from top of the shoulder to the elbow with a motion like forgiveness. Babies, he said, looking down at Ella, are not problems to solve. They are people to meet. Ella gurgled in agreement. Also robots, Tala piped in serious. Also grown-ups. Also the world. Also the world, Miggs repeated. Chapter 15. The story people tell long after the gala flowers had died, and the robots had rusted, and the articles had moved down the feed. There were echoes. A boy in Fresno who had watched the video of Miggs humming on the plane began to visit his aunt's house twice a week to learn the way her hands could make a knot in a shoulder untie. A woman in Westwood who had rolled her eyes at crying babies in restaurants realized she was really rolling her eyes at a younger self who had been told not to need anything. A man in a slate suit paid for a robotics kit to be sent to a school in a zip code he had previously avoided driving through. He did it quietly and didn't tell anyone because telling would make it about him, and it wasn't. A CEO in Los Angeles texted a kid in Queens and asked, "Should I have another meeting about this?" And the kid texted back, "Have another conversation instead." People who had been babies in rooms where no one knew what to do found themselves 15 years later in rooms with babies, and did the thing no one had done for them. They stayed, they swayed, they hummed something their grandmother had once hummed while kneading dough or grief. Chapter 16. Landing on a flight a year later to a city where a stage waited and microphones glinted and donors would expect to be charmed, Ella cried. Of course she did. She was 2 and the air was weird, and the man behind them had a laugh like a door squeaking on purpose. Nathaniel did not look for the curtain. He did not look for his wallet. He did not look for a boy from economy class to save him. He held his daughter against his chest. He breathed so slowly she had to either match his rhythm or complain about it. He pressed where he had been taught, not just on her small belly, but on the part of himself that had once believed control was love's most reliable language. The crying wavered, then spiraled down. He hummed a lullaby he did not, strictly speaking, know the words to. He sang anyway. Sa yugoy ng duyan, he whispered into her hair, in the rocking of the cradle. Margaret watched and smiled the kind of smile people save for miracles and Mondays. A seatmate leaned over when Ella slept and said, "I don't know what you did, but wow." "I listened," Nathaniel said simply. "I learned from a friend." When they landed, he checked his phone, a video from Miggs. The robot crossed a rope over a river. The water moved fast, but the bot moved slower because sometimes slow is fast if the goal is the other side. A text followed, "We did it." She would have laughed. "Want to see Queens again?" Nathaniel typed with a baby asleep on his shoulder and another meeting already pinging on his calendar. Yes, always. He stood, slipped the diaper bag over his shoulder, adjusted the strap carefully so it wouldn't creak against Ella's ear, and walked down the aisle of the plane, first class, coach, then the long tunnel to whatever came next. Outside, the air felt heavier than at 35,000 feet. More oxygen, more gravity. He shifted Ella's weight and felt only joy. Sometimes the most important journeys begin with the simplest of motions. A boy in economy crossing a stitched curtain. A man in first class handing over the thing he fears losing. A baby teaching 2 worlds to breathe together. And sometimes they end not with applause or headlines, but with the gentle murmur of a lullaby that has traveled oceans to find a new voice. Mahal, 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 beloved, always.